An 18-year-old girl told police that a masked man broke into her apartment, tied her up with her own shoelaces, raped her, and threatened to post pictures online if she told anyone. But instead of believing her, the police accused her of making it all up. They said her story had too many inconsistencies. They pressured her into confessing. Then they charged her with filing a false report. Her friends abandoned her. Her foster family doubted her. She even had to stand in front of a room full of people and publicly admit she was lying. For years, everyone believed she made it up. Until, more than 2 years later, detectives in another state caught a serial rapist. Inside his house, they found the exact same shoelaces, the same methods, the same threats, and photos of his victims. One of those victims was her. She had been telling the truth the entire time. And because nobody believed her, the man went on to attack more women. This is the unbelievable true story of Marie. A story of rape that is hard to believe. A girl who is 18 years old said she was attacked with a knife. She then said she made it up. That's where our story starts that day. No one else came to court with her, except her public defender. She was 18 years old and charged with a serious crime that could get her up to a year in jail. Misdemeanors don't get much attention. In 2008, there were 4,859 cases like hers in Linwood Municipal Court. The judge says the goal is to correct behavior to make Linwood a better, safer, healthier place to live, work, shop, and visit. But her crime had gotten a lot of attention, and people were either curious about her or, worse, scornful of her. It had cost her the new freedom she was enjoying after living in foster homes. It had taken away her sense of worth every time the phone rang. It felt like another friend had died. A 10th grade friend called and asked, "How could you lie about something like that?" Marie, which is her middle name, didn't say anything. She just listened and then hung up. Her foster parents even doubted her. Now she doubted herself, wondering if there was something in her that needed to be fixed. She had reported being raped in her apartment by a man who had bound and gagged her. Then, when the police pointed out problems with her story, she admitted that it might have been a dream. After that, she said she had made up the story. A woman from Western Washington has admitted that she lied about being raped earlier this week. Said one TV newscast she was there to accept or turn down a plea deal because she had been charged with making a false report. Her lawyer was shocked that she had been charged. There were no arrests or even questions about her story. His guess was, the police felt used. They don't like it when people waste their time. The prosecution said that if she did certain things for the next year, the charge would be dropped. She would need to see a therapist for lying. She would need to go on supervised probation. She would need to keep straight, breaking no more laws, and she would have to pay $500 to cover the costs of the court. Marie wanted this to be over. She agreed to the deal. January 5th, 2011, Golden. See you a little after 1 in the afternoon. On a cold day in January 2011, Detective Stacy Galbraith walked up to a long, anonymous row of apartment buildings that spilled up a low hill in a Denver suburb. There were patches of snow on the ground. It was windy and very cold. She was there to look into a claim of rape. Galbraith saw the victim standing in the weak sunlight outside her apartment on the ground floor. She was young and wore a long brown coat. She held a bag of her things in one hand. She looked calm and not worried. Galbraith said who she was. There were a lot of police technicians in the apartment. Galbraith told her and the victim to get away from the cold winds in a nearby unmarked patrol car. The woman told Galbraith that she was 26 years old and an engineering student who was home for the winter from a nearby college. The night before, she had been by herself in her apartment. She made green muffins for dinner and then got into bed to watch Desperate Housewives and The Big Bang Theory until she fell asleep at about a.m. A man jumped on her back and pinned her to the bed, waking her up. The black mask he wore looked more like a scarf that was tightly wrapped around his face. He held a gun that was black and silver. "Don't yell. Don't call or I'll shoot you," he said. He moved slowly on purpose. He loosely tied her hands behind her back. He took out thigh-high stockings, clear plastic high heels with pink ribbons, lube, a box of wet wipes, and bottled water from a big black bag. Over the next 4 hours, he raped her repeatedly. He took pictures of the attack with a digital camera and told her he would post them online if she called the police. Then he told her to brush her teeth and take a shower. He was gone by the time she got out of the bathroom. He had taken her sheets and bedding. She could clearly remember one thing about his body. A dark mark on his left calf that was the size of an egg. Galbraith was worried as he listened to the woman. The attack was terrible, and the person who did it was very skilled. There was no time to waste sitting close to her in the front seat of the car. Galbraith carefully brushed the woman's face with long cotton swabs to collect any DNA traces that might remain. Then she took her to St. Anthony North Hospital. The woman underwent a special forensic examination to collect more DNA evidence. Before she left with the nurse, the woman told Galbraith, "I think he's done this before." Galbraith went back to the scene of the crime. There were now 6 officers and technicians working. They were banging on doors of neighbors, taking pictures inside the apartment, going through trash cans, and cleaning the walls, windows, and every other surface for DNA. They found a trail of footprints in the snow that went to and from the back of the apartment through an empty field. They took pictures of the prints after spray painting them fluorescent orange to make them stand out. It wasn't a lot, but something. One officer said it was time for a bathroom break. "Just keep going," Galbraith insisted. Galbraith's mind raced as she drove home that night. "Who is this guy?" she asked herself. "How am I going to find him?" Galbraith often offered to take rape cases. She was a wife and a mother. She was good at putting herself in the shoes of the victims, most of whom were women. Most had been attacked by a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend, or someone they met at a club. A lot of the time, those investigations came down to whether or not someone had given their permission. Did the woman say yes? They were hard for police and prosecutors when one person said something and another person said something else. Juries were reluctant to send the person to jail. Strangers raping people was rare, happening in only about 13% of cases, but there was still the problem with the woman's story. Was what she said true, or making up a story to cover up a sexual encounter that went wrong in that way? Rape cases were different from most other crimes. The victim's credibility was often put to the test as much as the accused's guilt. And the police were the first people to look at the long, dangerous path between crime and conviction. A police officer who was looking into the case had to decide if the victim was telling the truth. Galbraith had a simple rule: listen and check. Galbraith said, "A lot of times people say, 'Believe your victim, believe your victim.' But I don't think that's the right point of view. I think you should listen to your victim and then back up or deny what you said based on what happens." David, her husband, had done the dishes and put the kids to bed at home. They sat down on different couches in their living room. Galbraith talked about what happened that day. The attacker was smart and tried to get rid of any DNA evidence at the scene. He showed the student how he broke in through a sliding glass door. Before he left, he told her to put a dowel in the bottom track to keep people from getting in again. Galbraith said that the victim had called him a gentleman. "He'll be hard to find." She thought David Galbraith was used to hearing stories like this. After all, they were both police officers. He worked in Westminster, which is about 15 miles to the northeast. Golden and Westminster were middle-class bedroom towns stuck between the tall buildings in downtown Denver and the Rockies. This time, though, things were different. David realized that the details of the case were eerily similar as he listened. He told his wife to call his department first thing in the morning. "That's just like the one we have," he said. "Linwood. She doesn't remember if she went to kindergarten. She remembers being hungry and eating dog food. She says she went into foster care when she was 6 or 7 years old." A mental health professional who talked to Marie for 5 hours wrote the report on her life. It is written in a clinical way and talks about her life before she went into foster care. She only met her biological father once. She says she doesn't know much about her biological mother, who she said would often leave her with boyfriends. She was hurt both sexually and physically, and then with adult caregivers and professionals coming and going from her life, some bad or abusive experiences, and a general lack of stability. Marie says in an interview, "I moved a lot when I was younger. I was also in group homes, around 2 of those, and probably 10 or 11 foster homes. I was taking 7 different drugs, and Zoloft is a drug for adults. I took it when I was 8. Marie has a sister and 2 brothers on her mother's side. At times, she and her siblings were put in foster homes together. They were more often apart. No one really told her why she was being moved or what was going on. She just moved after Marie turned 13. Her years of trouble seemed to be over. Her foster family was going to take her in. Marie says, "I really liked the family and made a lot of friends. A lot of students are nervous on the first day of their first year of high school. Marie couldn't wait for it. She had gotten all the classes she wanted. She had friends. She felt like she was a part of something." But on the first day, a support counselor came to the school and told Marie that the family could no longer be foster parents. She couldn't stay with them any longer. The counselor couldn't give any more information. Marie says, I mostly just cried. Basically, I had 20 minutes to grab my things and leave. Marie moved in with Shannon McQuarrie and her husband in Bellevue, a booming high-tech suburb east of Seattle, until she could find something more permanent. Shannon, a real estate agent and longtime foster mom, met Marie at a meeting for kids with troubled pasts and felt a connection with her. Shannon says that both Shannon and Marie were kind of goofy. We could make fun of each other and laugh. We were very similar. Shannon says that even though Marie had been through so much, she wasn't bitter. She stayed in touch with her old foster families. She could talk to adults. She didn't need to be pushed out the door to go to school. Shannon loved Marie, but she knew they couldn't keep her because the foster child they already had in their home needed so much care. Shannon says, we were really sad that we couldn't have her with us. Marie moved in with Peggy Cunningham after a few weeks at Shannon's house. Peggy was a children's advocate at a homeless shelter and lived in Linwood, a small suburb about 15 miles north of Seattle. She was Peggy's first child to be placed in foster care. I was getting ready for a baby. I had a crib, and they gave me a 16-year-old, Peggy says with a laugh. And that was fine. I have a background in mental health and have worked with kids for a long time, and I think the agency just thought she can handle it. Marie didn't want to live with Peggy at first. Marie was used to being with other kids. There weren't any for Peggy. Marie liked dogs. Peggy owned cats. Marie says, at first, our personalities didn't match either. It was hard to get along. It seems like people see me differently than I see myself. Peggy was surprised at how well Marie was handling things, given that she had gotten a file that was 2 to 3 inches thick that told her story. Marie liked boys, drawing, and music, whether it was rock, country, or Christian. Peggy says she was very bubbly and full of energy, but there were times when she could be very intense. Marie, like most kids, wanted to fit in. She chose a white coat with a fur collar because she thought girls should wear it. But then she put it away because she realized it wasn't. Peggy found a different school for Marie because she knew that her high school wasn't a good fit. Peggy says it was pretty cliquey. Marie got comfortable. She stayed close to Shannon, who would joke that she and Peggy were raising Marie together. Shannon was the fun one, let's go boating, and Peggy was the strict one, be home by. Marie met George Schweitzer, a high school student who worked at McDonald's, through friends. Eventually, they started dating. She was just a nice person to be around. Jordan says she was always nice to talk to. Marie thinks that her happiest years were when she was 16 and 17. The happiest day of her life might have been the one she spent with her best friend, who was also a high school student and was teaching Marie how to use a camera. I loved spending hours at the beach watching the sun go down. It was one of my favorite things to do. I really liked one of the pictures she took. We went to the ocean at about 7 p.m. I don't know what we were thinking. I jumped in and swung my hair back. Marie didn't finish high school. Instead, she got her GED. She was 17 and starting to stay out late, which made Peggy worry and caused problems between them. Marie turned 18 in the spring of 2008. She could have stayed with Peggy as long as she followed some rules. Marie, on the other hand, wanted to go alone. Peggy found a pilot program called Project Ladder while looking online. The program started a year ago and was meant to help young adults who had been in foster care as children learn how to live on their own. Case managers would teach participants how to shop for groceries, use a credit card, and buy insurance. Marie says the rules about life. The best part was that Project Ladder gave each member a 1-bedroom apartment for a low price. This was a godsend. Peggy says there weren't many slots, but Marie got one. She was a little scared, but she was also proud, which helped her get over her fear. She moved into the Alderbrook Apartments, a wooded area that claims to be close to a mall and have views of the Cascades. She also got her first job, which was giving out food samples to customers at Costco. She didn't mind being on her feet for 6 hours. She liked talking to people without having to sell them anything. A lot of kids who were put in institutions ended up in jail or on drugs. Marie had made it. Marie says, it was nice to be alone and not have to follow all the rules I had to follow in foster care. It was like being free. It was great. January 6, 2011, Golden, Colorado. The day after the rape in Golden, Galbraith rushed to work to follow her husband's lead. At 9:07 in the morning, she sent an email to the police department in Westminster. The subject line was begging. Sexy salty similars. Detective Edna Hendershot of Westminster had a venti, upside down, skinny caramel macchiato from Starbucks. To start her day, she read the email and her mind went back 5 months to a clear Tuesday in August 2010. She had gone to a blue-collar apartment complex in the northwest part of her city to look into a report of a rape. A 59-year-old woman told her that a man had jumped on her back while she was sleeping in her house. He had on a black mask. He bound her hands. He took her pink Sony Cybershot camera without permission and used it to take pictures of her. Then he told her to take a shower. He set a kitchen timer so she would know when she could leave. The man told the woman, who had just lost her husband, "I guess you won't leave your windows open again." There was more while looking into her case. An officer had told Hendershot about something that happened in October 2009 in Aurora, a suburb on the other side of Denver. A 65-year-old woman told the police that a man with a black scarf around his face had raped her in her apartment. He used a ribbon to tie her hands. He took pictures and said he would put them online. He knocked a yellow teddy bear off her bedroom desk during the attack. The woman, who was a house mother at a local fraternity, told the man, "You should get help," he said. "It's too late for that." Police officers can be protective of their cases because they don't want information to get out that could hurt their investigations. They don't always know about or use an FBI database that was made years ago to help catch repeat offenders. Studies show that between 25% and 66% of rapists are repeat offenders. But Hendershot saw right away how useful it would be to work together and use every tool at his disposal. "Sometimes 2 heads, 3 heads, or 4 heads are better than 1, she said. She said Galbraith did too. There were only a little over 40 officers in her department, which served a town of about 20,000 people. It was only logical to work together, Galbraith said. "I have no problem asking for help. Let's do what we can to catch him." A week later, Galbraith, Hendershot, and Aurora detective Scott Burgess met at a conference table in the Westminster Police Department. They looked at each other's investigations. The descriptions of the person who attacked were similar. His methods were the same. But there was one thing that made it clear. The woman in Galbraith's case had stayed as focused as possible during her ordeal and remembered everything. She remembered the camera that the attacker had used to take pictures. The stolen camera from the Westminster victim's apartment was a pink Sony digital camera, which fits the description before the meeting. Galbraith and Hendershot didn't know each other, but the search for the rapist brought them together. Both women were members of a sorority within a fraternity. Because they were police officers, about 13% of police officers in the United States are women most of the time. Police ranks are male, and they are often hierarchical and militaristic. But both women had made a place for themselves. They had risen through the ranks. The two got along well. They were both friendly. They told quick jokes and smiled quickly. Galbraith was younger. She was full of energy. A coworker said that she would move 100 miles an hour in one direction. Hendershot had more experience in her career. She had worked on more than 100 rape cases. She praised Galbraith for being careful, hard-working, and exacting. "Sometimes you miss some breadcrumbs when you are going 100 miles an hour." The same coworker said their first attempts to find the attacker failed. The Golden police got a video of the entrance to the apartment complex where Galbraith's victim was attacked. A detective friend watched more than 12 hours of blurry video on the night of the incident. He painstakingly counted 261 cars and people coming and going. There was one possible clue. A white Mazda pickup truck showed up 10 times before dawn. Maybe the attacker was waiting for the woman to go to sleep, but attempts to find out who owned the car failed. It was impossible to read the license plate. The dead ends kept coming as the weeks went by. Hendershot used the database that was supposed to catch serial rapists by connecting cases from different areas. It only gave us bad leads. Things got more and more frustrating. Galbraith thought to herself, "Someone else is going to get hurt." The detectives decided they needed to look into more things. By the end of January, Hendershot told one of her department's crime analysts to look through nearby agencies for crimes that were similar. The analyst found an event in Lakewood, a suburb of Denver, that happened about a month before the rape in Westminster. Police called the case a burglary at the time, but in a new light. It looked very much like a failed rape attempt by someone who looked a lot like the rapist. The analyst sent Hendershot a message that said, "You need to come talk to me right now." The report said that a man with a knife had attacked a 46-year-old artist in her own home. He had on a black mask. He tried to tie her hands together. The woman jumped out of her bedroom window. When the man turned his back, she fell 7 feet to the ground and broke 3 ribs and punctured a lung. But she got away at the scene. Investigators found a few weak pieces of evidence before the attack. The area had been soaked by thunder showers. Police found footprints in the soft, wet ground outside the woman's bedroom. They found marks on a window that looked like honeycomb marks on the honeycomb Hendershot took them. Crime scene investigators in Westminster found similar marks on the window of the victim's apartment. Hendershot wanted to see a comparison. The marks at both crime scenes were the same. They also looked a lot like prints from a pair of Under Armour gloves that a Lakewood investigator found at a Dick's Sporting Goods store on a Hunch Galbraith. Looked at the footprints that were left at the Lakewood scene. The footprints in the snow outside her victim's apartment in Golden looked the same. She sent pictures of the shoe prints to crime.co, a website that promised to move an investigation from an unidentified scene of crime shoeprint to detailed footwear information in one simple step. The site, which is no longer in business, said that the prints were made by a pair of Adidas ZX 700 mesh shoes, which were available in stores after March 2005. A partnership forms when DT Stacey Galbraith and SGT Edna Hendershot found out that a serial rapist was at work. They teamed up with other Colorado detectives to find him. Sometimes 2 heads, 3 heads, or 4 heads are better than one, right? Hendershot said by the end of January 2011. The detectives had linked 4 rapes that happened in Denver's suburbs over a period of 15 months. The 65-year-old woman started the trail on October 4, 2009, in Aurora, which is east of Denver. 9 months later, 22 miles to the west, the rapist attacked the artist in Lakewood. A month later, the 59-year-old widow was raped in Westminster, which is about 10 miles north. Finally, in January 2011, the 26-year-old was attacked in Golden, which is about 15 miles southwest of Westminster. It was almost like the rapist was going around the compass points of Denver's suburbs. If you drew a map, Galbraith and Hendershot used DNA to find this serial rapist. The detectives had looked at every part of the crime scene. Technicians had swabbed everything the attacker might have touched, like window panes, doorknobs, and even toilet handles. But the man knew how police worked, maybe even how to be a cop. He knew better than to leave his DNA behind. He used wet wipes to clean up his cum. He told the women to take a shower. He took their clothes and bedding with him. When he left, he had been very careful, but not quite right. The attacker had left behind the smallest signs of himself. The technicians found 3 samples of touch DNA, which are only 7 or 8 skin cells that can be looked at with modern lab methods. A sample was taken from the Westminster kitchen timer. A second came from the victim in Golden, and 1 came from the teddy bear that lived in Aurora. August 11, 2008, Washington's Linwood. 2 Linwood police detectives went to the Alderbrook apartments on a Monday morning around 9 to look into a report of rape. There were already a few other officers there to keep the crime scene safe. A K-9 officer was outside with his dog, who was trying to pick up a scent. Detectives SGT Jeffrey Mason and Jerry Ritgon found Marie crying on and off on a couch, wrapped in a blanket. Her case manager with Project Ladder, Wayne Nash, and her foster mother, Peggy Cunningham, were with her. Marie, who had just turned 18 3 months before, told the police that she had been on the phone with her friend Jordan for most of the night. A man with a knife woke her up after she finally fell asleep. Then he tied her up, blindfolded her, gagged her, and raped her. She thought the man was wearing a condom. Marie couldn't say much about what her attacker looked like, a white man in a grey sweater. Marie told the police that the attack seemed to go on for a long time, but she couldn't be sure. Everything was a blur. Marie said that after the rapist left, she was able to get some scissors from the bottom drawer of a cabinet with her feet. She cut herself free and then tried to call Jordan. Marie called her foster mother and then her upstairs neighbor. When Jordan didn't answer, the neighbor came down to Marie's apartment and called 911. Mason, who was 39 at the time, had mostly worked in patrol and drugs. He worked for the longest time as a police officer for a small department in Oregon, where he served for almost 9 years and earned a Medal of Valor. Linwood hired him in 2003, and he worked on a task force for drug crime 6 weeks before the report of Marie's attack. He was promoted to sergeant and moved to the Criminal Investigations Division. He had only worked on 1 or 2 rape cases before, but he was in charge of this investigation. Ritgon had worked for the department for 11 years, the last 4 as a detective. Before, he worked as a technician in the aerospace field. Before that, he worked in the Marine Corps, where he specialized in helicopter avionics. There were 79 sworn officers in the Linwood Police Department, which served a city of about 34,000 people. Marie was one of 10 rape reports the department got in 2008 because there were so few. The Criminal Investigations Division didn't have a separate sex crimes unit. When Marie told the police she had been raped, sex crime experts had already come up with ways to deal with the difficulties and sensitivity of rape investigations. These guidelines, which all police departments can use, went into detail about common mistakes. One guide told investigators not to think that a real victim will be hysterical instead of calm, be able to show clear signs of physical injury, and know every detail. Some victims mix up important details or even take back what they said. Police shouldn't get caught up in stereotypes, like thinking that an adult victim would be more believable than a teenager. Police should not question victims or threaten to use a lie detector. Lie detector tests are very unreliable for people who have been hurt, and they can make the victim lose faith in the police. Many states don't let police use them on rape victims. While they were walking around Marie's apartment, the police found that the sliding glass door in the back was unlocked and slightly open. It went to a back porch with a wooden railing that was covered in dirt, except for one part that was about 3 feet wide and looked like someone had brushed the surface while climbing over. Officers found a shoestring on the bed that was apparently used to tie up Marie. They found a second shoestring on top of a computer monitor, tied to a pair of underwear that looked like a blindfold or gag. The laces came from Marie's black tennis shoes that were in the living room. There was a knife with a black handle next to the bed. Marie said that the knife was hers and that it had come from the kitchen. She said that the rapist had used it to threaten her. The police found Marie's purse on the floor of her bedroom, her wallet on the bed, and her learner's permit, which had been taken out of her wallet for some reason, on the window sill of her bedroom. Mason told Marie she had to go to the hospital to get checked out for sexual assault after Marie left with her foster MO and case manager. The detectives helped clean up the scene. Ritgar looked in the bathroom, trash cans, and a nearby hillside for a condom or its wrapper, but he couldn't find one. The dog had followed a trail to the south toward an office building, but it couldn't help the police find anything that would help them figure out who the rapist was. The hospital staff took more than a dozen swabs from Marie. Tests were done for hepatitis, chlamydia, and HIV. Marie got Zithromax and Suprax because she might have been exposed to sexually transmitted diseases, as well as an emergency contraceptive pill. The medical report said that Marie's wrists and vagina had cuts on them. The bruise on her right wrist was 6.5 centimeters long, or about 2.5 inches, and the one on her left wrist was 7 centimeters long. The medical report said that Marie was alert and oriented, and in no acute distress during the exam. Marie called Shannon, her former foster MOM, after getting back from the hospital on the day she said she was raped. Shannon says she called and said, "I've been raped." There was no feeling at all. It was like she was telling me she made a sandwich. Shannon questioned Marie's honesty, because she wasn't crying or even upset the next day when Shannon went to Marie's apartment. Her doubts grew. Marie didn't look at Shannon when she walked into the kitchen. Shannon says, "That seemed very strange. Marie always hugged you and looked you in the eye." In the bedroom, she seemed relaxed, with nothing to suggest that something terrible had happened there. Shannon says that Marie was on the grass, rolling around and giggling and laughing outside. Marie was furious when she couldn't find the same set of bedding when they went to buy new ones. Her old bedding had been taken as evidence. Why would you want to see the same sheets and bedspread every day when you were raped on this bed set? Shannon thought to herself. Peggy was also confused by how Marie acted. Peggy says that when Marie called her that first day, before the police got there, she was crying and I could barely hear her. Her voice was so small that I couldn't really tell what she was saying. It didn't sound real to me in some ways. It sounded like a lot of drama. At the time, Peggy had 2 teenage sisters as new foster children. Marie had gone on a picnic with Peggy, her sisters, and Peggy's boyfriend not long before. Peggy thought that Marie had spent the afternoon trying to get attention, so much so that Peggy wondered if this was more of the same, but with more urgency. That morning, Peggy hurried to the apartment and found Marie on the floor, crying. But it was so strange because I sat down next to her, and she told me what happened. I got this really weird feeling, Peggy says. I'm a big Law and Order fan. I felt like she was telling me the script of a Law and Order story. Some of it was what Marie was saying. Why would a rapist use shoelaces to bind her? And part of it was what Marie said. She seemed so emotionally detached and removed. Marie talked on the phone with the 2 women who had helped raise her. Peggy told Shannon that she wasn't sure. Shannon said she did too. Neither of them had ever known Marie to lie. Sure, she would exaggerate and want attention, But now they both knew they weren't the only ones who were wondering if Marie had made this up, as Judy Mason's phone rang on August 12th, the day after Marie said she had been raped. Mason later wrote that the caller said that Marie had a history of trying to get attention and that the person was questioning whether the rape had happened. Mason's report didn't say who the caller was, but it was Peggy. She called the police to tell them what was wrong. Mason then went to her house and talked to her in person. She told the police that she didn't believe them and asked to remain anonymous. Peggy says, "I didn't want Marie to find out. I was really trying to be a good citizen. I didn't want them to waste their time and money on something that might be, This personal drama going on. Mason also heard that Marie was unhappy with her apartment. She might have made up the rape to get moved to a new place. Marie met with Mason at the Linwood police station on August 13th and gave him a written statement about what happened. The statement was just 1 page long. Mason, on the other hand, thought there was one very important part. Marie wrote that the attacker told her she could untie herself when he left. I picked up my phone, which was right next to my head, with my mouth, and tried to call Jordan back. I called my foster mom because he didn't answer. She came right away, hung up the phone with her, and tried to get free." This didn't match what Marie had told Mason before. She had already told the detective that she had tried to call Jordan after cutting the laces. She wrote in this statement that she called him while still tied up that same day. Mason told Ritgan, another detective, that he now thought Marie had made up the story because of the inconsistencies in her story and what he had learned from Peggy and Jordan. There has been a long history of people being afraid of false rape accusations in the legal system. Matthew Hale, England's Chief Justice in the 1600s, said that rape is an accusation easily to be made and hard to be proved, and harder to be defended by the party accused. Judges in the US read the so-called Hale warning to juries until the 1980s, but new studies show that false reporting is not very common. According to FBI data, police say about 5% of rape cases each year are unfounded or not true. Social scientists who look closely at police records and use strict scientific methods report rates that are similar and in the single digits. Mason went to Jordan's house the next morning to talk to him. Jordan told the detective that he and Marie had broken up a few months ago, but were still good friends. Mason's written summary says that he didn't say anything about not believing Marie's story, but he did say that Marie had told him that she had used her toes to call him that morning because she was busy. Later that day, on August 14th, 3 days after Marie said she had been raped, Mason called her to see if they could meet. He told her he could come get her and take her to the police station. "Am I in trouble?" Marie asked the detective. February 9th, 2011, Westminster. See, more than a dozen police officers and FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation agents met in a briefing room at the Westminster Police Station on February 9th, 2011, to talk about how the investigation was going. The news wasn't good. There were few leads and no suspects. After 5 weeks of searching, the analysis of the touch DNA yielded inconclusive results. The samples limited the pool of suspects to males from the same paternal lineage, but there wasn't enough genetic material to tell who it was. So the results couldn't be put into the FBI's national DNA database to see if they matched a suspect. Galbraith had hoped at least it was real. Now the same person was there. "It's big," she said, "but not enough." A young crime analyst from the Lakewood Police Department stood up as the meeting came to a close. For the past 6 months, she had been looking for any reports of strange cars or people walking around near the Lakewood victim's home. She had found something, but she didn't know if it was a big deal. 3 weeks before the attempted rape in Lakewood, a woman called the police late at night to report a pickup truck parked on the street with a man inside. The cops looked into it, but the man was gone. The officer wrote a short report about the car. The analyst was interested in the pickup's location. It was parked next to an empty field next to the Lakewood victim's backyard. About half a block from her house, the pickup truck was a white Mazda from 1993. A man from Lakewood named Mark Patrick O'Leary owned it. The investigation became very important right away. Could the detectives link O'Leary's Mazda to the blurry picture of the white Mazda in the golden surveillance footage? Detective Aaron Hassel ran back to his office to work on the Lakewood case. The cameras on Lakewood patrol cars took pictures of every license plate they passed without anyone having to do anything. The result was a database of thousands of tag numbers that could be searched by time and place. Hassel typed in the Lakewood report's license plate number, which was 935VHX. He got a hit. A Lakewood patrol car had taken a picture of O'Leary standing next to his white Mazda in the driveway of his house. This was only 2 hours after the August attack on the widow in Westminster. 1993 Mazda pickup. Surveillance stills show a 1993 Mazda driving around the apartment complex in Golden, Colorado, where a 26-year-old engineering student was raped. The mirror on the passenger side looked bent. Police Department of Golden Hassel sent the picture to Galbraith. She carefully looked at O'Leary's white Mazda and the surveillance tape side by side. One freeze frame showed that the passenger side mirror on her white Mazda was broken. O'Leary's truck did too. The backs of both cars had ball hitches. Both had marks on the back in the same spot, which could have been from a bumper sticker that had been ripped off. Galbraith said, "That's our guy." Hendershot found out that the Lakewood patrol car had taken a picture of O'Leary as he was driving to a nearby branch of the Colorado Department of Motor Vehicles. Records from the DMV show that O'Leary took a mugshot for a driver's license about 4 hours after the attack in Westminster. The picture showed a man who was 6 feet 1 inch tall and had hazel eyes. He weighed 220 pounds and was 32 years old. He had on a white t-shirt. The physical description was very similar to what the victim said. The widow from Westminster told Hendershot that her attacker wore a white t-shirt when he attacked her. Hendershot didn't want to rush things. "I'm happy and excited," she said, "but I haven't made my decision yet. We've got the guy." More than a dozen investigators worked together over the next 24 hours to learn as much as they could about O'Leary. There was no criminal record for O'Leary. He wasn't on the list of sex offenders. He had been in the army. Galbraith and her husband David were once again sitting on the couches in their living room. They used laptops and different search engines to look for any mentions of O'Leary. David soon found something. O'Leary bought a porn site in September 2008. They were curious if it had pictures of his victims. The investigators decided to try to get a sample of O'Leary's DNA. Even though the DNA taken from the crime scenes was too damaged to be sure it was O'Leary's, it could show that a male from his family line probably did. The crime detectives could be very sure that O'Leary was at the scene of the crimes if they could rule out his male relatives. Hendershot said, "We still have to make that final identification." On Friday, February 11th, FBI agents were watching O'Leary's house. It was a small one-story house with grey siding. It was in a bad neighborhood, half a block from a gas station, an auto body shop, and a commissariat. There was a short chain link fence around it. The roof was below the tall, bare trees. In the winter, the agents saw a man and a woman who looked like O'Leary leave just after noon. They followed the two to a restaurant nearby and watched them eat. The agents ran in. As soon as they were done, they took the cups off the table. There would be DNA on the rims. Mark O'Leary lived in the O'Leary house with his brother, who looked a lot like him, but the FBI agents didn't know that when they knocked. Another FBI agent knocked on the door of the house while the agents were following the man they thought was Mark O'Leary. He wanted to put up a camera nearby and wanted to make sure that no one was there. A man came to the door out of the blue. He looked like Mark O'Leary. The agent was confused, so he used a trick he had used before. He told the man he was going door to door in the neighborhood to warn people about a burglar. The man said his name. He was Mark O'Leary. Michael O'Leary, his brother, had just left to have lunch with his girlfriend. O'Leary thanked the officer for the information and shut the door. Michael's looks were confusing. The investigators didn't know that Michael lived with his brother or that he looked so much like him. They decided to compare Michael O'Leary's DNA, which they got from a glass in the restaurant, to the DNA found at the crime scenes. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation's analysts got the samples. It usually took months to do a DNA test, but in this case, they worked all night at PM. They got an answer on Saturday. The DNA from the cup was the same as the DNA from the victims. It was an O'Leary man who did it. But which one? Galbraith ruled out the brother's father because he was too old and lived in a different state. But investigators still couldn't rule Michael out as a suspect. Michael could have been the one who raped the women, or even that Mark and Michael had worked together. They needed more details. Galbraith quickly typed up a search warrant so that they could go into the brother's house when she was done. It was dark outside. She called the judge who was working that weekend. He wanted a fax. Galbraith hurried to a Safeway store near her house to send the warrant at PM. The judge signed it on Saturday. She knew exactly what she wanted. She believed what her victim said. The black spot on his leg. She sent an email to a crime analyst at another police department that said, "I really want to see this guy's leg. Bad." August 14th, 2008 Linwood. WASGG Mason said that when someone asked if they were in trouble, they were almost always in trouble. At about 3:30 p.m., Mason and Detective Rick Gunn went to pick up Marie. They found her outside her apartment, sitting on the grass. The three of them went to the Linwood police station. where detectives took Marie to a conference room. Mason later wrote that he didn't waste any time confronting Marie and telling her that her story didn't match up with what other witnesses had said. Marie said she didn't know of any differences, but she told the story again, this time saying she thought the rape had happened instead of saying it for sure. She cried as she talked about her past, including all the foster parents she had, being raped when she was 7, getting her own place, and feeling alone. Marie was told by Ritkan that her story and the proof didn't match. He said he thought she had made up the story on the spot, not planned it out. He wanted to know if there really was a rapist in the area that the police should be looking for. Marie said no, her voice soft and her eyes down. Ritkan later wrote, it was clear from her answers and body language that Marie was lying about the rape. The detectives asked Marie to write out the whole story, which meant she had to admit she had lied and committed a crime without telling her she had the right to an attorney or to remain silent. She said yes. So they left her alone for a while. She wrote her name, address, and social security number on the form. And then she wrote, in part, that night, I talked to Jordan on the phone about his day and just about anything else. When I hung up the phone with him, I started to think about all the things that were making me anxious. And I was also scared to be alone. I had a dream that someone broke into my house and raped me while I was sleeping. When the detectives got back, they saw that Marie's new statement said the rape was a dream, not a lie. Why didn't you say that you made up the story? Ritkan asked Marie, crying. Said she thought the rape really happened. She hit the table and said she was pretty sure. Pretty sure or really sure? Ritkan asked. Marie said, maybe the rape happened and I forgot about it. What do you think should happen to someone who would make up a story like this? Marie asked Ritkan. Marie said, I need to see a counselor. Mason went back to the proof. He told Marie that what she said about calling Jordan was different from what Jordan had said. Marie looked down with her hands over her face. Then her eyes darted back and forth like she was trying to think of an answer. The detectives went back to what she had said before about being stressed and alone, and after a while, Marie seemed to calm down. She stopped sobbing. She even chuckled a little. She said she was sorry and agreed to write another statement, making it clear that it was a lie. I was going through a lot of stress and wanted to spend time with someone, but no one could. So I made up this story. I didn't think it would go as far as it did. I don't know why I couldn't have done something else. This was never supposed to happen. The detective seemed to be happy with this statement. Later, Ritkan would say, after talking to Marie and seeing the inconsistencies in some of her statements, we were sure that Marie was now telling us the truth, that she had not been raped. Marie thought the questioning had been going on for hours. She did what she always did when she was stressed. She called it flipping the switch. And it made her stop feeling all the things she didn't know how to deal with. She couldn't look the two detectives, both men, in the eye before she admitted to making up the story. She could do it after that. She smiled. After that, she went to the bathroom and cleaned up. She was glad to be able to leave after flipping the switch, Marie told Wayne Nash, her case manager at Project Ladder, the next day, that the police didn't believe her. She said she needed a lawyer because she knew she was in danger. Instead of contacting the Project Ladder managers, they got in touch with SGT Mason. He said that the proof didn't back up Marie's story and that she had changed her mind, but Marie wouldn't give in. Now 1 week after she said she had been raped, on August 18th, she met with the two Project Ladder managers and said she had signed the recantation against her will. Then the three of them went to the police station so Marie could take back her recantation, which means she told detectives that what she had said before was true. Marie met with Ritkan and another officer while the program managers waited outside. Marie told Ritkan what was going on. Marie said she had really been raped and started to cry, saying she could see the man on top of her. She wanted to take a test that would tell her the truth. Marie was told by Ritkan that if she failed the test, she would go to jail. He would also tell Project Ladder to stop helping her with her housing. Marie gave up. The police officers took her downstairs, where the Project Ladder people asked her if she had been raped. Marie said no. Marie found out that she wasn't done yet. After leaving the police station, she had to do something else. Marie was told by the Project Ladder managers that she would have to tell someone else if she wanted to stay in the program and keep her subsidized apartment. That same day, there was a meeting at the housing complex where all of Marie's friends sat in a circle. Marie did what she was told and told the other people in Project Ladder that she had lied about being raped. She told the group that they didn't have to worry. No one out there had hurt her, and no one might hurt them next. Marie could only feel sympathy from one person in the room. The young woman to her right the rest of the time was awkward. Painful silence. Marie walked to her friend's house. After the meeting, she crossed a bridge. On her way, she thought about jumping. She says, "It was probably the only time I wanted to die in my life." Marie called a friend and said, "Please come get me before I do something stupid." Then she threw her phone over the side. There was one last surprise later that month. Marie got a letter telling her that she had to go to court. She was accused of making a false report, which could get her up to a year in jail. SGT Mason signed the criminal citation after that. Linwood sent the paperwork to a small law firm that had been hired to handle misdemeanors. Mason didn't have to do any complicated math to decide to file the citation. He was sure Marie had not told the truth. The police had to use a lot of resources to chase that lie. The law said that what she said was a crime. It really was that easy. There aren't any solid numbers on how often police arrest women for lying about rape or how often prosecutors take these cases to court. No one keeps track of that kind of information. But major law enforcement groups say that people should be careful when making these kinds of claims. The FBI and the International Association of Chiefs of Police both say that a full investigation is needed before a report of rape can be dismissed. It takes just as much work for cops to prove a lie as it does to prove a truth. In practice, many police departments will only charge women with crimes in very rare cases, such as when the case is very public and the suspect's reputation has been harmed, or when the police have spent a lot of time and money on the investigation. People don't want to report rape because they think that not reporting it is worse than false reporting. National surveys show that only about 20% to 30% of rapes are reported to the police. One reason is that women are afraid the police won't believe them. Marie quit her job at Costco just a few days after she reported being raped because she couldn't stand being around people and was lost in her own thoughts now. Her losses grew. Project Ladder told her to go to bed at PM curfew and made her meet with staff twice as often. The news wrote about Marie being charged, but they didn't say who she was. The Seattle Post Intelligencer headline read, "Police, Linwood rape report was a hoax." Marie's best friend from high school, the one who had taught her photography and taken that picture of her coming out of the water, made a webpage that called Marie a liar. It had a picture from Marie's MySpace page, police reports, and Marie's full name. Marie went crazy when she found out about the site and tore up her apartment. Marie no longer went to church. "I was angry with God." She says she stopped being interested in photography. She was afraid to go outside. "One night I tried to walk to the store by myself, and I thought I saw someone following me," she says. "It scared me. I didn't even make it half a mile from my house. I ran home." Once she got home, she stayed away from the bedroom and slept on the couch with the lights on. She says, "I went into this dark hole. Self-esteem turned into self-hatred. She began to drink, smoke, and gain weight." Marie had been through this before. She could trace it back to when she was a child and was abused, as well as to her years in foster care. When she moved from home to home and school to school, stop keep it in. She acted like nothing bad had happened and that nothing had ever bothered her. She would bury the pain because she wanted things to be normal. Peggy and Shannon didn't leave her. But things weren't the same. Marie knew that both of them had doubted her story. Even before the police did. Shannon's house had been a place for Marie to get away from it all for a long time. Marie and Shannon would go for walks in the woods or take the boat out at the end of the day. They would crash at Shannon's house. Shannon's husband was afraid that Marie might accuse him of something he didn't do, so he told her it would be best if she didn't spend the night anymore. Shannon says, "You're open to that when you become a foster parent." Shannon had to tell them it broke her heart to deliver it. Marie was crushed when she got it. A 63-year-old woman in Kirkland, east of Seattle, said she was raped inside her condo in early October. Less than 2 months after Marie was charged with making false reports, the stranger had gloves on. He had a knife in his hand. He used her own shoelaces to tie her up. He took pictures and said he would put them online. The woman told the police that for the past 2 or 3 months, she had the feeling that someone was following her. Shannon was shocked when she saw a news story about the attack on TV. Her dad was the head of police in Kent, which is south of Seattle. She grew up with the police, trusted them, and knew how they worked. She went to her computer, found the number, and called right away to tell the police in Kirkland about Marie's story and all the similarities. Shannon told Marie to call the Kirkland police as well. Marie never did. Marie says, "I was just too scared." She had already been through a lot. She couldn't face the police again and say anything more, but she did go online to find out what happened to the woman in Kirkland. She cried when she read the story. Eventually, a detective from Kirkland called Shannon back. Because of Shannon's tip, Kirkland detectives had contacted their Linwood counterparts, who told them that the Linwood victim was not a victim, and that the story was made up. Audra Weber was one of the detectives who worked on the Kirkland case. He remembers calling the Linwood detectives twice and being told they didn't believe what Marie said. Weber says, "I just kind of trusted their judgment because it's their case and they know the details and I don't." But she remembers being kind of shocked when she found out they had charged Marie. She hung up and said to herself, "Okay, I hope that works out for you." February 13th, 2011, Lakewood, Colorado. Galbraith knocked on O'Leary's door at 8:15 a.m. Police. A search warrant, she yelled over and over. "Open the door." 7 police officers stood behind her, guns drawn and pressed against the house. O'Leary opened the door after a short pause as he stepped out into the bright winter sun. He looked confused and shocked. Dogs, a small pit bull and a Sharpei, fell out in front of him. He had on a grey hoodie, loose grey sweatpants, and grey slip-on shoes. He was by himself. Galbraith took him aside and patted him down. She lifted his pant leg to look. When she got to his legs, there was a dark birthmark the size of a big chicken egg on O'Leary's left calf. It was him. He was the one who raped her. Galbraith gave a quick thumbs up when an FBI agent confronted O'Leary. He quickly said he wanted an attorney. Galbraith had moved herself so that she was behind O'Leary. She put him in handcuffs at 8:35 a.m. She told him, "You are under arrest for breaking and entering and sexual assault that happened in the city of Golden on January 5th, 2011. They put O'Leary in a patrol car and took him to the Jefferson County Jail that day. She had on new boots. She would always remember catching O'Leary when she looked at them again. It was important to Galbraith that he was the one who made the arrest. She said, "I guess I wanted to see the look on his face and for him to know that we knew what you were up to." The detective's investigation was confirmed by the search of the home. O'Leary's closet had a pair of Adidas ZX 700 shoes in it. The treads were the same as the footprints in the snow in Golden, and outside the window in Lakewood, they found a pair of Under Armour gloves with a honeycomb design. There was a black head wrap in the bathroom that was tied up to look like a mask. Galbraith said he was in the military, so he was very organized. "This was the tidiest house I've ever looked through." We were like, "Oh, thank God," because it was so well organized. Police found bindings, a pink Sony Cybershot camera, Adidas shoes, and a big backpack in O'Leary's house. All of these things matched what the victims said and what the detectives found. Police Department of Golden. The victims' stories were also true. Most of them had said that the man was white, about 6 feet tall, and weighed about 200 pounds. They talked about being bound. They said he had taken their underwear. Investigators found a black Ruger .380 caliber pistol, a pink Sony Cybershot camera, a big backpack, and wet wipes and lube in O'Leary's house. Detectives found a bunch of women's underwear hidden in a piece of stereo equipment in his closet. Towards Hendershot drove that night to tell the 59-year-old widow in Westminster what had happened. The woman had lost her husband to cancer the year before. She didn't have any family close by. She was still getting over the mental and physical pain she felt during the attack. Hendershot met her at a Denny's. She saw her in the back, eating dinner by herself. "I walked in, and she was so happy to see me that I told her." Hendershot said, "I get shiver bumps just thinking about it right now." I told her, "It's over. It's done. We have him." A forensic computer expert was able to get into files that O'Leary had saved on his hard drive. By the beginning of March, he found a folder called Girls that had pictures of O'Leary's victims in Golden and Westminster. Galbraith knew them by sight, but then Galbraith saw a picture of a woman she didn't know. It was a young woman, maybe even a teenager, who was much younger than the victims in Colorado. The pictures showed her tied up and gagged on a bed, looking scared. Galbraith was sick. How would she know who she was? How could she get justice for her? She found an answer after looking at the pictures. It was a picture of the woman's learner's permit that she had on her chest. It had her name on it, and it had her address, Washington's Linwood.